Welcome to Dragons on the Wall, our weekly Game of Thrones show where we're discussing the final episode of Season 8. The final episode of Game of Thrones ever, simply titled The Iron Throne. But I will tell you now, this is not the end for us. We will have one more Dragons on the Wall episode that will be a full series look back that'll be coming later this week, so please do stay tuned for that. But with that out of the way, I'm Terri Schwartz, and I am feeling fired up like King's Landing to talk about tonight's series finale.
I'm Laura Prudhomme, and I'm feeling like Drogon because I just want to fly the hell away and not think about this episode for a good week and a half. But I have to, because we're here.
I am Joshua Yale, and I'm feeling like Tyrion, because I'm going to need a lot of wine to deal with this.
I'm Jim David. I'm feeling like Arya, because I just want to sail away.
And of course, our special guest tonight are these water bottles that somehow made their way into the shot, like the ones that made their way into the final episode. Now, of course, we are talking spoilers here if you made it this far. Sorry, we had a lot of casual references to what happened in this episode, but what are you doing in a Season 8 finale review, if not here to talk spoilers for us? So, first question, I mean, this is the series finale of Game of Thrones. Sorry, I'm getting everyone pumped up because I know we have some divisive reactions, but Laura, first, your episode is up on IGN.com, so you very eloquently said all your thoughts there, but what did you think about this episode?
I will say them less eloquently here. I didn't love the finale, which I think is an ongoing theme of the season. Like, I've been very up and down on it. I just didn't feel as much as I wanted to feel. And considering how much time we've all invested in this show, I was expecting that I would be crying or like flipping a desk, or like last week's episode like made me feel stuff. I didn't like what I felt, but I felt very strongly. Whereas this episode, I was like, it was fine. How about you? Did you also feel fine?
I actually did kind of just feel fine.
Yeah.
I felt satisfied, like when the credits rolled, but upon reflection, I realized it didn't really like do a lot for me. Like, you're right, there weren't a lot of extremes. It just sort of like wrapped everything up with a bow, and I was happy that we got as much resolution as we did, and there weren't a lot of loose ends, unless you're like a huge like Meera Reed fan.
Just Terri. It's me, I'm the only one.
But yeah, it was fine. It was fine. I feel like it was almost like Breaking Bad, where the true like crux, like the true finale, the true climax was the second to last episode, Ozymandias, which is what we got with the bells with Game of Thrones, and now this was just sort of all resolution.
Yep. What about you, Jim?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was, again, fine, but I think maybe a slightly higher grade of fine. I agree that, you know, this was basically an epilogue. And I feel like at this point, 8 years in, we have all envisioned what the ending would be. So I don't think there was any way that it wasn't going to disappoint to some degree, because everyone has written this thing in their head a million times now and envisioned a bunch of scenarios. So there was really only so many ways they could surprise us unless it ended with Dany on the Iron Throne, and or the Night King coming back, something like that. So I felt like it pretty much ended in the most straightforward way possible, and there was something in there for everyone, which maybe, like the episode itself, all being about a compromise that kind of made no one happy, that was kind of maybe the episode for people. But like, I liked it fine.
I think it's interesting that none of us hated it, because I haven't had a chance to really dig into the internet's response, but a lot of people that I've seen thus far have skewed a lot more negative. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time talking, theorizing, thinking about it. Jim, to your point, like, I think we've thought about just about every different possible ending for the show and probably written articles about it for IGN. That being said, I didn't expect Bran to end up on the Iron Throne.
Didn't see that one
until I accidentally, someone in a YouTube comment flippantly just a week ago wrote, well, everything in episode 4 that the leak said was true, so I guess that means Bran is king. And I was like, no! So I kind of thought that might have been happening. I know, commenters casually spoiling things that haven't even aired yet. That being said, I did generally like this episode. I absolutely need to rewatch this season, because I think I liked this episode within the context of what this season ended up being. And also like this episode within the context of knowing George R. R. Martin almost certainly is going to write a much more satisfying version of this ending that's going to fix a lot of the WTF questions that we'll get to later this episode. Yeah. But my biggest concern going in was it was going to be a conclusion of nihilism that there was going to be no point. And there was a point in the end, and these things that we kind of predicted with Daenerys turning into a villain, Jon having to kill her, like to me they were satisfying closure to things that weren't necessarily surprising, but I thought played out really beautifully with the performances, and even the writing was better this episode than in some previous ones. Yeah. But I'll also agree with you, Laura, like I didn't necessarily feel overwhelming emotion. In fact, I felt more overwhelming emotion earlier this day realizing that this is the end of Game of Thrones and what that meant for me personally, who has been thinking and obsessing about the show for so long, than this show necessarily inspired from me.
Yeah.
I think, look, it was, again, like an 8-year run, and it's, all things considered, this was phenomenal television overall, the entire series. And I think we should be grateful for this show. It was unprecedented, and
it's
it was
changed TV forever.
Right.
Yeah, and it was great fun, and I enjoyed it, even when it was flawed, even when things made you angry or disappointed. It still engaged me, and I'm happy this show happened.
Yeah.
I never read the books. It was something I've learned a lot about, and I actually want to go out now and read what is it, Fire and Blood?
Yeah, it's like a tome about the history of the Targaryens.
Look, if anything, right? It makes a tome. I'm going out tomorrow, and I'm buying a tome.
I'm Archmaester Schwartz, and we're here to talk about tomes.
But no, it's made me ultimately want to seek out the work of George R. R. Martin, and that's a good thing. Just like, I'm not a fan of the Star Wars prequels, but I've got an entire generation of people into Star Wars, and that's a good thing. So, yeah, all things considered, I really wish fans would stop complaining so much. I just think...
Sorry, Jim.
I think in hindsight, let's give it a couple of years. Maybe the season will be looked at a little differently. Emotions are pretty raw right now with it.
I actually rewatched all of season 8 today.
You're better than me.
In preparation for this, and looking back on it, it doesn't really. It feels like I'm watching it on fast forward, and so many things happen without feeling earned. I thought it might smooth out watching it all in one. It doesn't. Not really.
I think they really thought about it. The showrunners thought about it like episode by episode. And watching this episode, I felt like once we get to the point where Daenerys died, imagine if that was the end of a season and everything that came after was another full 10-episode season.
Right.
Like there is enough material there to warrant the what comes after. And those are the things that I'm like, you can't help but feel rushed towards this conclusion, which certainly the past few episodes have felt a victim of that. And you have to think that George R. R. Martin is going to spend more time in the books getting into it. And I think part of why I wasn't as angry last week as certain people were, I don't feel as angry. I feel largely satisfied with this ending for my favorite characters this week, is because I can kind of like assume connecting the dots from what I imagine, except for the Bran part. I'm really stumped on the Bran part. I'm like, feel like they're just gonna have to characterize the character better in the books than they did in the show.
But it's also like you shouldn't have to have knowledge of the books or an assumption of what George R. R. Martin is going to do to make it feel earned or to make the characterization make sense. Like David Benioff and Dan Weiss, HBO would have given them as many episodes as they wanted, and they ultimately chose not to do that because they wanted to just be done with it, or they were exhausted.
Live their lives. It's been
They've got
10 years.
other things to do, but it's like getting to this final point, like why rush it when you've put so much time and invested so much into this world and these characters? Like, just spend an extra 1 year of your lives doing it. Wait and go to Star Wars, a year from now.
What happens when they get tired with Star Wars halfway through? Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. So we are going to dig deeper into this episode, of course, but first I wanted to look back to the very first episode, the preview predictions episode Laura, Joshua, and I did for this season. Jim, we missed you, but you weren't a part of the predictions. I'm sorry you don't get to tell us how right you would have been.
Nobody saw me ending up on the throne. Just saying.
Our amazing producer, Nick, went back and tabulated how many of our predictions about who died and who lived ended up coming true. Before I spoil who won, because there was one clear winner here, let's go back through what ended up happening and who got it right and who got it wrong. So our first prediction was, will Daenerys die? Joshua and I both said yes. Laura,
I
Sorry.
failed.
I know. But, it would have been quite a depressing twist had you ended up being right. Our second question was, will Jon die? And Joshua rightly said he would not, while I and Laura both thought he would. And I still really like my theory that, he was back for a purpose. And apparently his purpose was saving the wildlings and killing Daenerys. So
And petting ghosts. That's all we
cheered obnoxiously loud when that happened.
That was the most exciting part of the episode.
Really
that made me
was.
feel
really sad,
something. We were
but that was it.
We had a group of 10 of us just there being like, it's gonna happen. Pet him, yeah. And so many, there was another section of people watching in our office being like, what was the thing you were cheering about? Well, we were very happy. Yeah. All right, next. The question was, will Cersei die? Joshua said yes, very sadly, because she's one of your favorite characters. Laura and I both, I don't know what we were thinking. I think we were just being saucy, but we were very wrong about that one. I don't know.
Seems like dumb of us. I don't know.
Well, we didn't know the way the season would go. We also asked, will Jaime die? We all said yes, and he did. So we were all right. We asked if Tyrion would live, and we all were right. We said he would. We also were right about Sansa. We all said she would survive. Whether Arya would live, we also were very brutal. We both said that she would die.
I thought this was going to be a much meaner season than it was.
Yeah, I knew my girl. She had those survival instincts.
You were
beaten into her in the face over and over again.
I wanted her to live. I just didn't think they'd be that nice to us.
You can dodge a stick. You can dodge death.
You were hopefully everyone can see the trend of who won this with being right. We all were wrong with Bran. We all thought he would die.
Yeah.
Joke's on us. He ended up being king of Westeros. And lastly, the question was, would the Night King die? And we all were correct. He did, in fact, die. So Joshua got 8 out of 9 of these predictions correct.
I wish we had a crown for you.
I know. Sorry.
That's fine. Oh, wait. Who won?
Dude, if you put money down in Vegas, you wouldn't have to work it out.
If you need your Vegas odds predicted, if you need to know, guess what the gender of your child would be, you know who to go to. I don't know. It's late in the evening, guys. Those are the only predictions I could think of. And yeah, don't come to Laura and I for anything. We both only got half of those. Right?
Yeah. I just expected everyone would die. It just seemed so obvious to me.
Yeah, you're right. There wasn't a high body count. I don't know how I saw that, but I guess
for all of King's Landing and all of the White Walkers.
But clearly
it's a little tough
matter.
after last week to top that body count. And ultimately, didn't you really just want to know, does the hero survive and does the villain die? And ultimately it answered that question.
The 3 core Starks survived. Bran wasn't even a part of that final montage, but seeing Jon and Sansa and Arya just
strut.
That was really emotional. I really did like that montage of them.
It was also very Lord of the Rings kind of thing. I mean, to bring it back to George R.R. Martin's kind of Tolkien influence, and that sort of everyone gets to go off in the end and go off in their ship, and it is bittersweet and all that jazz. So. Yeah.
She's going to the Grey Havens, guys.
Yeah.
It'll be fine, but not to die.
I feel like Jon was more of the Grey Haven parallel.
Yeah.
He's someone who suffered a lot and he was sort of going into an exile of sorts.
He's Moses.
And had a very bittersweet ending.
Yeah.
He's Moses. He gets to lead them to the promised land, but he cannot end her.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what's disappointing the most people, that Jon and Dany were supposed to be our heroes, and Dany dies, and Jon ends up basically back where he started and doesn't get any kind of hero's journey, which I think is very fitting.
Yeah, I prefer that than him being the cliched, I'm going to be the hero who saves the world, which is what it seemed like it was kind of being set up to be.
I just don't want Dan and David to come back and say the reason they chose Bran to be the king is because that's what people would least suspect, which is what they said about Arya killing the Night King. But I have a feeling the Bran plan came from George, which we'll forever call it the Bran plan. Before we move on to our first big deep dive into this episode, to kind of wrap up the death predictions, I do want to ask, what was the death you found most satisfying this season?
Oh, wow.
Don't start with me.
I will say this, the death of Cersei and Jaime was just so surprising that looking back on it, I was like, that was a really well done death because of the circumstances of that episode. When I always thought of the siege of King's Landing, I thought it would be an awesome moment with, Dany, Jon, and the big armies assaulting King's Landing, and then Cersei really getting what she deserves. Mm-hmm. But in that episode, I was horrified by what the good guys, in air quotes, were doing. And then I felt such utter sympathy for what happened to Cersei, who is this horrible, horrible creature of hate. Yet in her final moments, I was just empathizing with her as a human, and I thought that was such like a beautiful end. And for her to go out with Jaime. What would you call it, Jim? From womb to tomb.
It literally was from womb to tomb.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was a really satisfying way for those characters to go.
And I like that it didn't end at that either. That like we got that moment in this week's episode where Tyrion is able to go back. He finds them.
You knew they were going to see the hand.
I was so worried he was going to
be
walking on them, but he didn't.
And it's funny. I know Terri, you love the part in the.
Tyrion's story about his cousin.
Yes, with Tyrion talking about how his cousin kept bashing those beetles with the rocks. And I was like, what is the point of like all these dead beetles? And sort of like an analog to the series of what is the point of all these dead bodies? It better mean something in the end.
Yeah.
And it was when Tyrion picked up one of those bricks and was like smashing it on the ground in front of these two dead bodies. I think it was sort of echoing that. It was almost like a callback to that very iconic moment, that scene of Tyrion. And I think, for Tyrion, it was a very helpless, nihilistic moment of like, what was the point of all this if like my family, those who I love the most, are dead?
That's absolutely what I thought was running through his mind when that happened. I was thinking about that scene too, because I know I've been talking about it a lot.
And especially at the hands of someone he trusted and loved in Daenerys and didn't think that she would be that kind of person.
He put all his chips on her, and what was the point? But it did have a good point. But anyone else? Any other most satisfying deaths this season?
Yeah, I mean, I agree about Jaime and Cersei. I do think God, I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry. Hold on a second.
I will say my favorite, most satisfying death. I also agree with you on Jaime and Cersei. But I love the way Lyanna Mormont came out. A character who, absolutely, you can tell, was not going to be more than a single scene until she was just the best and owned that first scene she was in, and they built her up to have this bigger role. I love that she, the tiniest little warrior, got to go out killing a giant. Of all the deaths in The Long Night, I thought that was the best one, and maybe not completely earned for people who don't love Lyanna Mormont as a character, but I got such a thrill from seeing her go out that way.
I love the Night King, Arya and the Night King. I know that it's very divisive.
Lord, get off this show!
I'm kidding. But because it was unexpected, but because Arya has been training for her entire life, and it really is earned in that way that they've kind of laid the seeds of her actually being a very competent and skillful little ninja assassin. I remember when we were watching it, we cheered almost as loud for that as we did for Ghost getting petted.
Priorities.
And it was just such a great crowd-pleasing moment, even in an episode that was
Adding a question inside of a question I have out, were you disappointed or not that Arya did not wear a face this season?
A little bit.
I
A little bit.
I kept waiting every
I thought
episode.
they had moved past that, though.
Well, yeah, I think the fact that
she has a skill set.
They used that twist with Walder Frey so well that I feel like it would have been kind of cheap to do it with Cersei as well, but I wanted it to happen.
She did use a little ninja move to somehow go all the way up the stairs and appear next to Jon in this episode.
Yeah, maybe she's off screen using the faces to
But
get past the White Walkers.
There was a
to get
whole
past the dragon.
sequence of her using unsullied faces to get out.
Just slowly killing them, taking the face, killing them.
I remembered who I was going to say. As much as Missandei's death was really a gut-wrenching thing, Clegane. That epic showdown, the fantastical imagery, I really love that. It was some of the coolest stuff in Game of Thrones. And I thought that was a far better duel than anything we really saw this season. And I will say, are we going to talk about disappointing deaths or no?
We can get to that a little bit later. That'll be a good transition. But I will say, so I need to go back and rewatch it because I've been on the Clegane hype train for so long that when it was actually happening, I was kind of in shock and didn't take it in enough. And our producer Nick and I were talking after, and we kind of were we didn't love that it was cutting away to Arya, but I saw someone position it, and I kind of felt that way when I first saw it, but the more I've thought about it, I saw someone on the web, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, say that it was kind of positioned as Sandor Clegane is fighting for his death, Arya is fighting for her life, and that's kind of the parallel and duality, and I do really like that and appreciate that, and I'm glad that they kind of pulled that in, even though our Clegane Bowl clips will now forever have Arya Stark in them as well. No clean editing.
Nope.
A lot of big climactic duels, though, cut away to things. I mean, even in Vader versus Luke and Jedi, they're cutting away to what's going on in the Moon of Endor. So
that's true. All right. What a good segue, very long segue to our next topic. the death of Daenerys Targaryen. She notably was not any of our picks for most satisfying, so we can talk about whether we think she's one of the least satisfying deaths or disappointing as we go through this. But let's kind of break down the beats. So Daenerys gives this big speech in Valyrian to all the Unsullied in Dothraki, where she basically is full tyrant, right? But it's the type of speech that would mirror something she would give when conquering Meereen, when we were cheering for her, not a city that we know, where she says, congratulations, basically, like, you have freed these people from a tyrant, you have saved them, now we're going to go off to free everyone in the world, not just in Westeros, but Noth and all these other places beyond, which we as the viewer now realize, okay, she's not going to stay here and rule. She is going to do this everywhere but beyond. And even though Tyrion and Jon don't necessarily understand Valyrian, Tyrion can get the general gist of it.
There's a tone there.
And then in this scene, you know, Tyrion gets taken captive for betraying Daenerys, and he and Jon have this scene where Tyrion basically says what we discussed in last week's episode, right? Where, like, talking about her arc, how she's built up to this point, saying stuff that I was like, did you take this from some of the articles we have on IGN? We're arguing the same thing. And that ends up resulting in Jon, as Daenerys is saying everything Tyrion is saying that she'll say, kissing her, saying you're my queen, but then killing her as well. What do you think?
I mean, I didn't think it was the most inventive death. I mean, I feel like I've seen that kind of thing before. She got killed monologuing. Yeah. You know, and it was sort of, I mean, we knew, I think, you know, we knew she was going to die. I think maybe at the beginning of the season there was a little bit of doubt, but, you know, I think by last week we kind of knew, like, she's toast one way or another. I think there was probably a more inventive way they could have done that than the old, oh, you got me and I should have been paying attention, that kind of thing. I've seen that in, like, tons of movies.
Sure, yeah.
But
didn't they do it in, like, The Force Awakens, if we're going to bring it all back to Star Wars, which I love to do.
Well, they
but it's
clearly
like
have a lot of inspirations with, like, the Rey lightsaber drop.
Yeah.
They're like, it was their audition tape for Star Wars,
how
basically.
depressing.
But I just think that she ultimately, you know, she died a pretty relatively quick and painless death. And I'm sure he wanted that, but it wasn't the most dramatic way to end that. And she dies fairly early in the episode. She gets her big scene and then she's done.
Yeah.
And also, I will say, like, leading into that, there was a lot of, like, triumph of the will imagery. Like, she flies in just like that movie opens with, like, Hitler flying in and everyone's lined up and there's the
banners.
friggin'
Shot of-
black
yeah.
banners, and I'm like, she's basically all in black, and you're like, yep.
I think it's
she's gone full
supposed. I
desperate.
really
it's
think that it's supposed
evoke
to invoke that imagery. Yeah. But we will say, we were talking about this. The shot of her walking out in Drogon, like, kind of flexing his wings
so
as she walks
beautiful.
out. Probably one of the best shots in Game of Thrones.
Definitely.
With or without context.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
Somebody's getting a tattoo of that, right?
Absolutely.
On your
No,
back.
that was awesome, but I actually hated her death and all the circumstances leading up to it. It's just that she went full tyrant dictator, that we had no option to even, like, sympathize with her. She's such a complex character. It's shortchanging her to just have her go, like, turn that evil dial all the way to 10, to 11 even. And then put Jon in a position where, of course, he had to kill her.
Right.
And as the audience, I felt, like there was only one way this could go, and that's never really been the Game of Thrones way, or what's made Game of Thrones interesting. And so I was really disappointed that they pretty much just made her so evil that we as the audience couldn't even, it's very understandable why she would die, but I wanted to see some conflict there, I wanted to see some struggle, even like a physical struggle, but she's just taken out, she doesn't even get like a last word, she's just stabbed and she's gone.
Very quickly.
That was a knife to the heart, like blood was gushing out of her face.
Maybe I am a sucker, which certainly could be the case, but Jon has been so stupid this season that when he started saying, like, you're my queen, like, all this stuff, and, like, I almost thought, I was like, God, what if he does side with her and then
like
goes
they're gonna
and,
go
like,
evil
kills,
together,
and then he ends up killing her, and I was like, oh, okay, but, like, for a moment I almost thought he might have gone that way. Again, I could just be a sucker.
I would have liked that more. That would have been more interesting to me than, as I agree with Joshua, like, because the show has kept us out of Daenerys' perspective on purpose this season and kind of kept us at arm's length to, like, shock us, whether it works or not. It just feels like you just don't get the emotional context for why she's doing any of these things, what she's feeling in that moment. And it is such a disservice to her character that she's been such a nuanced character all the way through, and if you're going to make her a villain, make it like Walter White, where you understand what she's feeling, why she's making the decisions.
I agree. I think that the show made a huge mistake in not cluing us into her thinking this way.
Yeah.
Or like, yes and no, because I do think that the evidence is there, right? But there was no gradual ascent to this. It just happened, and she just made this choice, and I agree. I think the big problem is we as viewers are not in Daenerys' head. The first time we go back to being in her head and really kind of her having her guard down is that scene when Jon enters the throne room.
Yeah, where she's like joyful about having the thing that she wants.
She never sits in it.
I know. She never sits in the Iron Throne after all that. And, you know, I did like that in that moment we kind of see the world, the way she views the world from her perspective and why she doesn't see herself as a villain. But the show really relies on that big... frankly, I really loved the Tyrion and Jon scene where Tyrion is like breaking it all down for him and like challenging him and saying like, don't make this mistake, you know what to do. That is when the show explains her quick turn, which is a mistake.
But again, it's like showing, like not telling is how you're supposed to do storytelling.
Right.
And we just have a lot of characters this season.
Like, we showed it. She destroyed King's Landing.
It's like a lot of characters telling other characters she's bad and psycho and crazy and and you just never see any justification from it from her perspective. So it just fell so flat to me that I'm like, it could have been so good if we actually got some like actual nuance for it.
That being said, I was gonna say I actually did like it. Very much on the other extreme.
Now it's your turn to get out.
I liked it again within the context of this season. Within, like, I wrote like a big long piece about last week's episode, and like really, I personally went back and like tracked all the stuff that kind of led her up to this point. And so I personally had the context going into this that was fresh in my mind. And so with that, I see all the problems and how they didn't set it up, but knowing this is the rough trajectory that George R. R. Martin set up, and again, faith in the books, doing a better job of this, like I think the overall structure of it, I'm okay with. Yeah. And I love that the episode set up, I'm going to be in the minority so much, please be kind to me in the comments, but I love that it set up her very like Hitlerish, tyrannical thing, and then also has her self-awareness of it and really points to the fact that, like, to me, I was watching that scene, I was like, she did this in Meereen. She did this exact same thing and gave a very similar speech in Meereen, in Astapor. Like, we have seen this before.
But not to women and children, Terry.
But here's what I'll say in response. It's what Tyrion said too. Like, they were all bad men. They were all bad people, and she had to do it. But was every master in Meereen evil? No.
I mean, they owned slaves.
Sure, but that was the same argument she said for why she had to kill the women and children and the men of the King's Landing army.
Yeah, but I just don't buy that. You know, like.
I think she made a conscious choice to say
these little children are not going to be like raising arms against her. They're not the ones who like cheered for Ned getting beheaded.
But every despot thinks the child of the person they kill will come back to get them.
And also, like, her argument would be, well, they chose to be with Cersei. They chose to run into King's Landing. They chose her instead of me. And that was like the switch. And it's like this gradual descent of like she has decided who is good, who is bad, what is good, what is bad. And I felt like I got this from this episode, and I think that is why, as a part of the greater whole, I liked it. I really think the show did a sloppy job of doing that, but like overall as a story arc, I was okay with it.
Surprised she didn't needle Jon and be like, all those people you're upset about, they cheered when your dad had his head cut off.
Well, that's the thing. I just wanted more context for why she felt that they were a threat or that they deserved that. We didn't get any of that. It was just like, oh, Cersei used their innocence as a weapon against me. But that still doesn't justify killing them. Like, you're saying that they're innocent and that should have made you stop, and it didn't. But that's not.
But the thing is, somebody could make the argument that there's never any, that just genocide is genocide, and it's like, that's my enemy and I'm going to wipe them out, and apparently that's the turn that she made.
But she even has that line where she's like, we've just liberated the people of King's Landing. There's no one goddamn left.
Right.
Yeah.
Who did you liberate? Who are you? Like, it's fine if she's delusional and thinks like hypothetically she saved them all, but like Jon is literally pointing out to her that she incinerated all these people, so it just There's just a
You don't
disconnect
see,
in her
there's
thinking.
just that one guy at the beginning who seems to be alive, who's like scorched.
Literally
That's
one
it. You
like
don't see
shell-shocked guy.
anyone.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's
also there's that mysterious beach that somehow exists outside King's Landing that, like, I don't know, where people...
a plot beach.
It does make sense.
I will say two things. One is that hearing you guys talk about this, I really just get the sense that Dany's not a ruler, but she's a great conqueror.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that
Yes,
like,
yes,
war
yes,
is
yes.
a drug, right? And she's on one hell of a high, right? And she just wants to keep going. It's like, we will do this for the whole world, right? Like, look how great this is. Second thing I was going to say was bringing it back to her actual death scene is I think a crucial part that didn't work that would have made it land for me. I don't know how you guys feel, but it was supposed to be the element that they were truly in love, and that
Never felt true
that
to
was,
me.
this is like an Anakin Padme level romance, which is all the way down to the bottom. I don't know if you guys heard that, but our producer Nick just scoffed. He laughed. But yeah, when Jon says like I love you, like you are my queen, and then stabs her, that's supposed to be like a heartbreaking, like heart-wrenching moment. And to me, I kind of stifled a laugh. I was like, oh really? Is that where we're going with this?
Especially when he's been like pulling away from her for like weeks or however long it is. Like every time they've been almost making out, he's like, oh no, incest again. And
he won't even
The
put
show
out.
never even said the word incest. He never was like, you're my aunt.
But apparently
This is
it bothered him a lot, according to like interviews with writers and showrunners and people. They're like, ugh, incest. But
I
you
agree
never
with you.
get that from the show.
The chemistry between them just never worked, which is probably because they're great friends.
Right. It's so
kind
weird.
of like the Ron and Hermione thing in Harry Potter, but I think that worked, even though they got over the fact that like the actors were such good friends. But this one, it always kind of rang false. And also Tyrion casually just being like, I also was in love with her. And I'm like, okay, well, there are all those theories, I guess, validated, but it never really
You didn't
mattered,
feel it.
I guess.
Meh.
We're going to
living
get
guy
into
in a
some of
friend
our
zone.
WTF questions later, but let's talk a little bit about the after Daenerys' death. There's this big scene where Drogon shows up, very upset.
Very upset.
Very upset. And like, honestly, I'm very curious how they animated Drogon's face. I almost feel like they could have used motion capture because like the way that Drogon emoted in this episode was frankly just
beautiful.
Fantastic. Yeah. Like you felt how he felt, and it like everyone's been comparing it to the Lion King I won't spoil the Lion King for people
20
because there'll be
years
a
ago,
new
spoilers.
generation seeing that movie later this year. But a lot of people comparing it to that. A lot of the reason why there are so many WTF questions, a lot of unstated things happening here. Drogon does not kill Jon. Drogon decides to destroy the Iron Throne, and again, like a really freaking awesome scene.
Really cool.
And then takes Daenerys and flies off somewhere to the east. What did you think about kind of ending Drogon's journey and tying back Jon's Targaryenness in this way?
That was an interesting twist because for sure I thought that Drogon was going to try and kill Jon. They were going to have like a Jon versus Drogon battle. Like it was, like I thought that was like a boss he was going to have to overcome. But as we know that Targaryens have a special bond with dragons. It's never been strictly defined, but it's kind of amounts to like Dany can essentially kind of like semi-warg in like control Drogon and essentially steer him.
Oh,
She's
like
not
Avatar.
even. Oh, it's kind of like that.
She plugs her tail
Is that why her
Or
hair
just,
is
like,
so long?
warging.
Yeah.
This thing within the world of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, so she was plugged into Drogon the whole time. But yeah, so anyway, so she can kind of like steer him and drive him, even though she's not shouting commands or anything. Right. They have a really strong connection. It's something of that Targaryen heritage. So when Drogon went to launch that stream of fire at Jon, he kind of turns his head away. I think it's just by instinct, by his almost Drogon's genetics that he could not end Jon's life because he's not allowed to harm a Targaryen. Also, he's kind of made a bond with Jon. He's not a stranger to him, and he knows. I think maybe the way that Dany loved Jon, that probably also like bled into Drogon having an affection for Jon as well and not wanting to hurt him. But I think when he came up, he sensed something had happened to Mommy, and he came up, and I think he understood what had happened.
It was awful.
The same with the dire wolves and their connection to the Starks.
Yeah, and so I do think that dragons are a little smarter than your average animal, your average bear. So I think when he went to vent his rage and was bellowing out all that fire, I think he on purpose like saw the throne and knew what that symbol meant and knew that Mom died for that, and then took his rage out on that and like burnt it into magma. And we talk about how we were cheering for Jon petting Ghost, but we were cheering for that throne getting melted down.
Well, the irony is there is no greater...
The irony throne?
The irony throne of the name of this episode. The irony of the Iron Throne being melted in that way after Daenerys' death is that she wanted to break the wheel. And the way that the wheel was broken was through her death, which is like really tragic, honestly. And it was through her death and there not being this obvious heir left to the Iron Throne, because for whatever reason they decided Aegon Targaryen isn't a good contender, I guess, because he killed the queen, is that like that is how this new democracy-ish way of deciding the ruler of the 7 kingdoms or 6 kingdoms would happen. Like I think it's like, I think it's quite poetic.
I like that. I like that part of it for sure.
Also, it was so cool, that scene.
It just looked gorgeous.
I kind of read it too as Drogon as like, if she couldn't have it, no one can.
Right.
And like this almost sort of a beast sort of respect for its master or something like that, where it's like he could turn on him, he could have eaten him, I guess, but like there's some part of him that knows that they're connected to, but sort of like if she can't have it, no one can, and screw all y'all, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go bury her in an ice cap somewhere.
Going home.
The most emotional I got during this episode was the look on Drogon's face when he was like looking at Dany and nuzzling her and like trying to be like, "Are you alive?"
Yeah.
Like,
wake up.
Yeah, it was. I was very moved by that, and again by a CGI creature that apparently they saved Ghost Pet's budgets for later episodes.
And I will say that
a little bit.
For all we can have problems with character arcs and plots and stuff, this show looked gorgeous. And I know people like to nitpick the dark episode, but I didn't think it was too dark. No. But check your TV settings, I don't know. But this show is gorgeous and such a visual feast of just epic, awesome fantasy things that we don't even get things that look this good in movies.
No,
like this is the highest production fantasy thing we're probably going to get for a long time, and we should really appreciate that. It's really awesome. But Terry, you have a theory on where Drogon may have gone.
Let's save it for our WTF questions later in the episode.
Okay.
There's a structure to this whole thing.
There'll be some
I forgot about that.
Okay, let's move on to our next big talking point, our slight time jump that quickly reveals to us that of everyone who could have been king or queen and ruler of the 6 or 7 kingdoms, it was Bran the Broken who ended up being king. There is this election where freaked out a little, guys, but Edmure Tully came back. The glow up that is Robin Arryn came back. We got to see all these characters. We got to see the new Prince of Dorne. All the great house leaders came together.
A few randos that we don't know.
A couple randos we really can't figure out who they are. If you know who they are, please let us know and we will credit you because we cannot figure it out. I hope Howland Reed is in there somewhere, but I doubt it.
No one cares about the Reeds except you.
I care. Where's Meera? Justice for Meera. Anyway, so this group of people comes together. Sam suggests, let's have the people decide who is going to be king. Literally everyone laughs at him. Instead, they decide that Bran will be king on Tyrion's suggestion, and people listen to a prisoner who betrayed his former queen because
why not?
Show logic. And then they decide that because Bran cannot have children, every future ruler will be decided by all the lords and ladies of the great houses from there on out, which is, again, kind of breaking the wheel. What did you all think of Bran being chosen to be ruler and also kind of getting all these great houses together and the solution that they come up with to their Jon Dany problem?
I liked the almost democracy of it. I'm with you. I did not ever expect Bran to be the one, but he's the only one who doesn't need a throne, technically.
He has his own.
He's got his own wheelchair and he looks real cool doing it, so that's great. It was very nice to see everyone together, to see how they're all doing. Davos getting a vote, even though he's technically not like a lord of any
He even
big
he's like, I don't even know if I get a vote, but like, sure, like that was one of my favorite lines.
I guess. I wanted a little bit more. I don't know what I would have wanted that more to be, but it just felt similar to other parts of the episode a little bit by the numbers, a little bit, we'll round everyone up and here's what happened, like not 5 years later, like a few weeks later when like Jon and Tyrion have grown beards and stuff.
Let's just say though, actual normal travel time in this portion, if we assume that Varys sent his letters to all the leaders of the great houses in the last episode, those made their way to them, so everyone knows Jon is Aegon Targaryen, and then we know from the very first episode of Game of Thrones, winter is coming, that it takes several weeks to a month to travel down the King's Road with a whole big group of people from King's Landing to Winterfell, so having them say it's several weeks to get there,
I was happy with it.
All
Apart
tracks.
from, I don't believe that Jon Snow can grow that much of a beard, given like 5 years.
He's a man now, Laura. Sometimes you can grow a beard
that's
fast.
some patchy.
We got a guy in the office that
here.
can grow a beard in a week. I can't, but that guy
Kit
can.
Harington cannot, so it's
Well,
not.
Kit Harington is not Jon Snow. I feel like Jon Snow can grow a beard in that amount of time.
That's about a month. Tyrion's that was really impressive.
Tyrion's was an impressive
He's
get to
always
that
had a
level.
really impressive beard.
Yeah.
He already had the start.
I sidetracked us by nitpicking about beards.
We want to ask the men in the group. Do you think that's realistic beard growth? Yes or no? Tell us.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on
important things.
genetics and a lot of things.
Yeah.
I
mean,
should have
how
saved it
did
for
he-
WTF questions. Darn.
No, I think ultimately the fact that why wouldn't they listen to Tyrion?
Right.
If the thing is, they all knew Daenerys was
Correct.
the bad queen at this point, and that
The
she
Mad
had
Queen,
the
Jen,
Mad Queen, but
Mad
she also was
Queen.
bad.
Both bad
But
and
like,
bad.
why wouldn't they have listened to him? And frankly, like the Unsullied were an occupying army at that point. Like, I feel like they would have. But why would they also have backed Jon? Because they're like, you brought this monster to our doorstep. Yes, thanks for the whole Night King thing, but kind of like Winston Churchill, like, thanks for winning us the war, but we're going to vote you out now, you know?
Right.
So it was kind of like, to me, the history buff in me was enjoying the fact that there were a lot of mirrors to things from history where it's like, okay, you can get us to this point, but then we're done with it. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
I was completely dumbfounded by Bran getting named king. I see the logic in it. I'm doing air quotes if anyone's listening on the podcast. But you should be watching the video so you can see all of us doing these crazy things.
We're
We're all doing crazy dances right now. Woo! Well, Jim's not, but...
Can you tell we have wine in our cups? We hope you are having as much fun as we are having.
But yeah, I thought that was so weird to make such a boring, inert person of a character the king, which is such an important thing, when he's had no character development, and he's been sitting on a rock.
But if he can see the future, he's going to be the greatest king ever. He's going to know what's coming.
But he can see the past.
Yeah.
That's more important, right? Is that he can
But he
see
knew
every
why he
mistake
was coming
that
there.
every person has made before him, and hopefully make smarter decisions in the future. But I think, Joshua, you said exactly the problem. The show has not done any character development for Bran or given him anything to emote for seasons.
Yeah, like
and
3
if
seasons.
anything, the only thing we know about him is that he's completely dispassionate, doesn't care about the fate of anyone except he apparently knew he was going to be king, and he's like, why do you think I showed up? Which I thought was really smug and kind of crummy
I didn't
of him.
like it.
And I think, we've talked to Isaac Hempstead Wright, the actor who plays Bran, about this, and this was kind of like the trajectory they decided, like he and the showrunners decided to take Bran on to kind of process all the data he's downloaded or whatever. And like this, of all of the storylines, is the one that I really hope the books do a better job with to get. Because I fully believe that the showrunners did not go the Arya killing the Night King route of like, this was just more surprising.
Right.
I think that this came from George, but I think George will do a better job of getting us to this point and having it make logical sense.
But
Terry,
Terry, you think that name dropping,
A lot of
every
faith in the
great
books that
Stark
come
is
out.
named Brandon or something,
Right,
right?
Bran the Builder.
Yeah.
Made the wall.
The shipwright guy,
We're going to work on a piece about all the Brandon Starks who were kings on IGN
it's
this
not
week. so
that
keep an eye
surprising.
out for it.
Look,
I will
George R. R.
say-
Martin loves the name Brandon, people.
I will say that at least to me, it's kind of a callback to, Tywin Lannister has that conversation with Tommen after Joffrey dies about what makes a good king. And he says wisdom is the thing that makes a good king, and knowing who to delegate to have advisors around you who know what they're talking about and to listen to them. And that at least is Bran. Like, he might not care about everything, but like he has assembled, as we see in one of the final scenes, a crack team of people with great titles and who can snark and be entertaining and are also very loyal and experienced and will give him good counsel. So it puts the realm in a slightly better position than it was, but again, I don't feel like it's breaking the wheel in enough of a way, the way that like Sam's democracy, like every Westerosi
Give it another
person
500
gets
years, Sam. You're ahead of your time.
They'll get there.
But maybe a dispassionate ruler is a good thing after all this passion, all these people wanting this thing and
thinking about their legacy,
invoking
too.
the people and all this kind of thing where Bran doesn't really care about anything except just the realm surviving. Maybe that's exactly what they need at this moment in time.
Also, Bran
Stability.
can cheat and look at what is happening anywhere in the world at any point in time, past, present, or maybe future. We are kind of still unclear on that. So, yeah, he has a great lead on that.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch that show of him just being a boring leader, sitting there being like, I'm just going to go over here and see what this person is doing. That's not.
I will say this, in this episode, for the first time, he like kind of thawed out a little bit and was less of kind of the very super stoic, awkward Bran. Still awkward, but not as awkward. And I think if they had started that thaw maybe once he came back to Winterfell and it was like reunited with his family, and then it was less of the of like, you know, overloaded by the downloaded information and more of like becoming a person again. I think if we had done that, it would have been a lot more interesting and a lot less awkward. He wouldn't still be a meme, a living meme in a wheelchair.
Right.
But we didn't get that. And so, yeah, I feel like super awkward that the answer to all these questions of who's going to wind up on the Iron Throne, well, there is no Iron Throne, but who's in charge? It's Bran, and it's still awkward.
You know what it is? It's the guy who is different on the job interview to the day he shows up on the job. He's like, hey, suddenly, hey, I'm that guy. You're like, whoa, that's not the guy we interviewed.
didn't sign up for this.
Now, I will say we already talked a bit about the unexpected reappearances in this episode, and I do think that I'm the only one who is disappointed by the people who did not show up. But let's list a couple of them that we did not see again. There is Meera Reed, of course, who I should point out had like the most disappointing final scene ever, where in her final scene with Bran, she's like, really, that was the point of my entire arc. Go back and watch it. I swear that's what she says. There also was Daario, who
just chilling in Marine, I guess.
Is he though? Daenerys left Daario behind to like run Marine, but he is a sellsword whose girlfriend just dumped him. Like he for sure just took as much gold as he could from Marine and pieced out, and like Daenerys left that entire part of the world in disarray. Yep. There's Gilly, who I'm assuming is just like pregnant in Hornhill and like happy because Sam is. Although would she have come to?
I guess she would have come to King's Landing.
Maybe,
with Sam,
hopefully,
right?
hopefully they didn't.
It's like
wait, if he's like the Master Maester or whatever now, can he be married?
He is the Master Maester.
Is that like, are they like have like priest rules where
That's
they can't be married
That's a great WTF
anymore?
question for our next segment. And then also I threw him on here, but Archmaester Eberus, like. We mention him. Yes. Sam gave him the great meta suggestion to call his tome of like King Robert the First reign and the wars that came after, or whatever, A Song of Ice and Fire. But they did not appear in it. Sad, not sad. I think I know the answers, but I will ask anyway.
What, that Terri didn't show up?
Well, that those four people did not show up.
I wasn't losing sleep over any of it.
Yeah.
I was happy we saw Brienne again. I honestly was worried that we wouldn't, so I was glad that Brienne
They wanted to be
came back.
really cheeky. They could bring Daario back, but have Ed Screen play him again. just to be
He was just in the background.
Meta, yeah. I really, like, Meera could be, like...
No.
She could, like... But
so you can't even come up with a weird role for her to play.
No, that's no point.
What they should have done, and honestly, I wonder if the actress who played her just like was like, I'm not going to come back for a final season.
Was she the one who left the water bottle?
Yeah, maybe. She's the one who's just trolling them, leaving all these bad Easter eggs behind. But like, I really thought that the Reeds should have been summoned in the War Against the Night King. It didn't, unless they were dead. It did not make any sense for them to not rally to like the Bannermen.
I feel like they just forgot about them. I feel like it was honestly as simple as that. They just forgot that they were a thing. They were like, oh, we have the Umbers, we'll kill them. That's it.
I know I'm focusing on the small details in the lack of previous Ghost Scritches and Meera not showing up, but I'm just... You know what? I'll take my Edmure and my Robin Arryn. Yes. They remembered some of them.
They did.
They remember... There you go. So with that in mind, let's go to our big WTF questions of this episode. My first one I'll present to you all, and let's try to answer them. We may not be able to. I don't know that there necessarily are always answers, but my first question is, why did Sansa in the North secede from the general 7 kingdoms to now be 6 kingdoms? And Why was everyone, including King Bran, okay with it? I do not understand.
Would Sansa have succeeded if they said, well, why don't you be in charge? I read that as almost out of spite of like, I'm going to be in charge. I love you, little brother, but that should be my job.
Maybe, but like
a little bit of that.
Stark is king of all of it. And if she doesn't, why didn't every other kingdom
That was the thing.
say,
I was like, why?
Me too?
Like, why wouldn't Dawn be like, yeah, I want to be my own independent nation. Screw you guys. That was. It didn't make sense. It made sense to me that she would want that. It didn't make sense to me that others would not like follow suit.
I still don't understand why she still would want that though, with Bran on the throne.
Well, I get it because it's more about the Northmen, right? She kind of makes this mention. Another thing that I will just briefly mention is that. The episode drove me a little nuts in that we don't see the kind of scope of what all of this means for the wider Westeros. We kind of see this council of people making the decisions, but we don't know if anyone outside of King's Landing even knows that this happened or cared or, anything that's happened. So to me, if you say we have like thousands of angry Northmen outside the walls who are like going to riot if you don't free Jon, I think that the Northmen have suffered enough. They were on the front lines. They're the ones who died fighting the Night King. They're like, we don't want to bow. We were king in the North thing.
The rulers helped, though.
I think that it's just an independence thing. It's like, why should we bend the knee? Because Bran's not going to be around forever, and then who knows what the next person will
They're
be.
just
So
nationalist, isolationists.
I think so. Yeah, I feel like they're like, we're planting our flag now. We don't want to deal with any of your political BS anymore.
So couldn't they all splinter apart again?
That's what I'm saying.
sure.
Like, why wouldn't
Absolutely
everyone
they
else
could.
have the exact same response instead of Bran? Like, first of all, Sansa's like, North is gonna peace out, and Bran's like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
He sees everything.
It's
He
just
knows
the like
something.
narrative corner cutting that's been a problem this whole season. It's like, we don't have time to make a big deal out of this, so it's just going to be fine.
Yeah.
Don't think about it too hard.
They did need to do the work to show why the people would not want to join knowing Bran was in charge. But I understand that because they know that being part of that whole thing didn't work out, regardless of who was in charge for them, really ever.
I mean, Davos did say the whole thing, like, thousands have already died. Can't we just get along kind of thing?
Yeah, and so I think they were just like, even if Bran's in charge, it doesn't really change. We still want to be independent.
Yeah.
But why didn't the other kingdoms like voice their
I expected
opinion?
Dawn at least to be like, us too.
Also, it maybe was kind of a power play on Sansa's part of saying, I got to take what's mine. Like I worked so hard. Like she fought like hell to bring Winterfell back to House Stark, and she wanted to keep it that way. And also, I just think that they fought so hard to get Winterfell back and the North back, and the people of the North made it very clear that they didn't want to ever, and so
Bend
that had to have
knees to anyone but whose name is Stark, and it's Brandon Stark.
But I think in the North, don't they say any king in the North whose name is Stark? I can't remember what they say.
I think that's that's like we're getting out to semantics, but I think they were like, it's almost like a honey trap of like, but it's Bran Stark, everything should be fine. But I think no, like they just truly wanted to be their own people. Yeah, they did not do the work, but I kind of see it. I think they knew the audience would remember. Oh yeah, there was that whole thing where they will not bend the knee to anyone in King's Landing ever again. And so they were just carrying that through and assumed we'd all assume it was fine, even though it's really not.
I'm not sold, but let's move on to my next question. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering why does Bran have to stay in King's Landing? There's literally nothing there. There's no throne. There's no one there to rule.
That's another
There's
good
no
question.
stuff. I'm
It's
like,
in the
he could
middle-ish,
go back
I
to the
guess.
North and like what?
So hard to rule an entire kingdom from a fringe. But so my next question is, speaking of fringes, if the North has seceded from the Seven Kingdoms and there are no wildlings to threaten the wall and there's no White Walker to threaten the wall, why does the Night's Watch still exist, and why is it still based in Castle Black, which is technically outside of the Six Kingdoms that Bran rules?
That is a great question. That is a very WTF thing. I think it's almost like you do have to have border defenses. Like there can
But
be.
it's not their borders anymore.
That is true, but
Someone
It's
did it.
Australia.
it's
It's,
kinda like-
where you go to send the convicts.
Yeah.
the United States, there's Canada and then Alaska, right? So maybe it's that kind of situation. Like The Winterfell, or sorry, yeah,
You got sent to the radar
The
station
north
in Alaska.
is like Canada.
I think they need a punishment zone, and now it's like Guantanamo Bay, but like nicer.
It's the penalty
And
box
also,
in
is there
hockey.
even a Night's Watch like we see Jon and all the
Jon
wildlings?
even asks that. He's like, "Is there still one?"
And they're like, "Oh, sure, there needs to be somewhere
"Is
to
he the
send
Lord
them."
Commander?" That's, I guess, another WTF question.
You think as part of like re-establishing, like breaking the wheel and everything, and changing the format of everything, they would get away from this like what is essentially like
Antiquated,
indentured
yeah.
servitude. And like this place where you banish people to like this icy tundra and make them live out their lives in these like horrid conditions and like, you know,
and rely on all these like rapists and murderers to like be honorable and like
But
somehow
also
protect
someone who
other
saved
people.
the realm / betrayed it, and also is the one true heir. He's Maester Aemon, but now he is
The new
Aegon
Jaime-
Targaryen.
Well, he's the new Jaime Lannister too.
He's also the last living Targaryen, if you think about it. And the actual last living Targaryen who, if he sticks to his vows, will never bear a child who will be another
Everyone's just
Targaryen.
like, no more Targaryens.
Yeah.
They didn't do so good.
So is that the real reason then? Why they're like, we got to keep the wall there because otherwise this guy can have
I'm
a
going
kid.
completely off script. I haven't even gotten to our actual number 2 here. But yeah, why did they just disregard Aegon Targaryen as being potential king?
Right, especially it's kind of up for debate whether Varys succeeded in sending all of his letters, how many he sent, how many people at the council actually do know Jon's true lineage, because you have to wonder how many of those people would be like, oh yeah, he is the rightful heir, and so what if he killed like the second in line for the throne? He technically deserved it. So I feel like most of those people had to not know to make it make sense.
I mean, they were all just sitting there. Sansa and Arya could have said, hey guys, you know, our brother's the real deal.
I mean,
he's not technically their brother.
I have 2 reasons. One is that they just decided they didn't want to do this whole monarchy thing anymore. So
I just wish it happened on screen.
Right, where they had that conversation. Like at least somebody brought it up.
Right.
I forget my second thing. Never mind.
Well, again, going completely off script, another WTF question. We saw what happened to the Unsullied. They went to Noth in homage to Missandei. What happened to the Dothraki?
They were just hanging around the wharf.
Yeah.
Like I think they're just part of. They're
Are they
integrating in
just there?
society now.
Yeah.
Causing trouble.
The
Are they
Dothraki,
sellswords
the
now,
perfect
basically?
group to integrate into a society.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll
At
become
least
like.
they're alive for now.
Yes, we thought a lot of them.
thought
Pretty
they
much,
were
we
all
thought all of them
gone. Well,
died in the Battle of Winterfell, but
Yeah.
then a ton of them were still alive for the Battle of King's Landing. So I guess not.
Very convenient.
But yeah, maybe they're just like a people with no nation. Like maybe they're like the Golden Company, where they're like hiring themselves out as like these like really badass sellswords.
But we
But
have
they're
to
nomadic, aren't they? So I mean, they're just like, it's a new place
guess
to
they
wander.
could
Yeah,
sail back.
I think, but would they? Because they're so afraid of sailing. Last we heard, but Daenerys got them to overcome that fear. Like, are they just chill with it now?
They're
It would be cool
afraid
if they
of
became
water.
the
That's
next.
their thing.
Yeah, because you should go back and watch the show,
Okay.
Jim. It's a whole thing about
Welcome
going
to Game of
I
Thrones.
got Dracarys on that.
that was my Dracarys with a weird noise. Okay, back on script. What is up with Drogon's behavior? He did not kill Jon Snow, and he just flew away to the east. We hear Sam say, what do you think is kind of the reasoning behind why he did not kill Jon? I know we talked a little bit about this earlier. And where do you think he has gone?
Yeah, we already touched on the fact that it's probably something to do with the fact that Jon is a Targaryen who already has an established bond with this dragon. Forgive me for jumping ahead and explaining that earlier. But as far as where is Drogon going now, well, to bring it back, you had a great theory to where he might be headed, Terri.
I
Tell us your theory.
I've been talking a lot. I figured I would talk. Anyway, I think if he's going east, it makes sense that he would go back to Valyria with Daenerys. That is where the Targaryens came from. That is the home land of dragons. And even though it was destroyed in the Doom of Valyria and it's left smoking and burning and is the home of people with grayscale, the stone men, we saw when Jorah and Tyrion kind of passed through before that when Drogon was pissed at Daenerys and off hanging out on his own, that's kind of where he hung out. And so I think kind of his innate instincts would have him take her back there. She'll
Do some
rot,
nesting.
whatever.
Maybe
and then I
pop
think
out
he'll
some
just
eggs.
be there. But I am curious, like, why did Bran want to see where he went and what did he want to do with that information?
Well, a dragon is a weapon
nuke.
of mass destruction, exactly. And so you want to keep tabs on that.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think Bran wanted to seek him out and hunt him down and kill him or try and tame him or warg into him or anything. I just think he wants to know where that dragon is and what it's up to.
So I guess he can't really see the future then.
I think it's always been unsure whether Bran was prophetic or not. It's always been murky on whether he could actually see the future, or is he just...
We've seen many different paths that could go, but I don't know that he can see the outcome.
Things.
Yeah, I think it was. Although he does have a couple lines that make it seem like he was predicting the future, because like the line where he says, "Well, why do you think I'm here? To be king, of course." Or maybe it's kind of like him playing chess, and he's seen every move everyone's ever made, so he knows that the game he's playing, he knows how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
I think it's more like that.
Yeah. Another brief WTF questions for you all specifically. Are you disappointed that Bran did not work into a dragon?
Yes.
And we did not find out if you can work into dragons.
God damn it, yes. There have been at least 2 options like that in this scene, in this episode, and back when he was doing bugger all with the Night King.
Like, that's the most British you've ever been on this show.
You're welcome. Well, when he was just kind of sitting there and letting Theon get murdered, he was like, "Oh, I've walked somewhere, and it's presumably into ravens, but I'm
also disappointed. I'll give a quick yes.
Maybe that's why he wanted to find him.
Yeah, maybe.
The sequel will just be Dragon Warg Bran.
There we go.
Forever.
Game of Thrones call one Dragon Warg.
Jim, this next WTF question is one for you because you've already written a good explainer on the site. But the big question is, what is west of Westeros, which is where Arya is heading?
Apparently America. That's what's
the Game of Thrones version of America.
I mean, I actually found it really interesting because, again, like I said, I'm really into kind of history, and I've been reading a lot about like Vikings and Scandinavia and like early explorers and all that jazz. And basically, like, west of Westeros is a mystery. There have been many people who've tried, a lot of sailors, and the sort of the superstitious and the ignorant think their world is flat, but the maesters know it's round, and so does George R. R. Martin, because he said it is, I guess. And then, but there was a character named, I think, Alyssa Farman, and who was basically the kind of the Arya of her time. She was a spirited, free-spirited young girl who went off and ventured around the world and went exploring, and she got lost to sort of the mists of time. But some people theorize, some fans theorize, that she actually showed up in season 2 of Game of Thrones as Quaithe. This sort of
Quaithe has to be someone.
Something she's a mass thing,
I love that.
and that she learned magic, she learned to live a long time. But basically, like, that could totally be a spin-off of Arya living the high life and going out there on the high seas and finding what the new world is. Because we know that there's like a Far East and all that, so there's going to be somewhere like a Northwest Passage kind of thing that can kind of connect these places. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting.
I'd watch that spin-off.
Now, if you go far enough west from Westeros, you do wind up in Easteros.
It's true.
It's called Essos, but that's a very good joke.
I know.
Well, no, actually,
I know.
Quaithe did say to get east, you have to go
You look
west.
so sad.
She did say that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is something to it.
WTF question, do you think prophecies will mean anything in the books?
I think in the books, maybe. I mean, they meant nothing here.
Words are wind. Isn't
Yes.
that a popular phrase in the books,
Yes.
especially?
Yes. That's the thing. It's so open to interpretation. Like, what does it mean?
Who is Azor Ahai? Who
I
is the
wanted
prince who was
that to be
promised?
something, but no.
How will the sun rise in the west and set in the east?
Who was the prince that was promised then? Was it Bran? I don't know. For the listeners,
answers.
they all shrugged.
Yeah, we all shrugged.
Yeah.
Perfect shrugs.
Yep.
All right, last WTF question. I know I went very long with all these, but in the final scene of the final episode of Game of Thrones, Jon is with the wildlings. He's traveling north of the Wall, and they are walking into the woods. What does this mean? What is he doing with them? Has he abandoned the Night's Watch? What is your read of what he's doing in this scene?
My Meera Reed is that he... That was for you, Terri. No, my read on this is that, no, he did not abandon the Night's Watch. I feel like, we forget because a long time has passed, but he really put himself out there to help the free folk, the wildlings, and he literally died to help. That's what got him killed, because he was like, oh, we need to help them, bring them to this side of the wall, and all that stuff. That's what got him killed. He died for them, was brought back. He was brought back by the Lord of Light, right? And
for a
reason, part of that was probably to stop the Night King, to help stop the Night King, even though Arya was the one who
did nothing.
Did the dirty business. And then also maybe it was part of it was to take down Daenerys, but maybe the final part of it was to restore these people these displaced like refugees essentially like to their land. And I think that's what he was doing. He was just guiding them out safely back to their home, and I think that's a beautiful poetic way for that to be his final purpose. In a way, we see it as bad that he was exiled to the wall, but that he was placed back there by fate in a way and got to help these people who he had indebted himself to, and finally, got a nice peaceful ending.
And it ends where it began, right? Within the woods north of the wall, which is that opening prologue scene.
Yes,
with those White Walkers who meant nothing.
Yeah. And then it also brings the whole show full circle because those woods were a dangerous, creepy place in the very first episode, and now they are a place free where these
children can literally run through the woods, which is lovely. I had a different reading, and I think that he is, because I think Tormund has that line a couple episodes back where he's like, you have the north in you, like you would be much happier north of the wall, like Ghost would. So I think that's his way of I'm gonna go and have a peaceful life.
But there's also that line was it the death of love is duty, and he has to go back and see.
But who's gonna check if he's at the wall or not?
So you're saying that he did abandon the Night's Watch, and he's literally just abandoning his post and going off to live with them?
Yep.
That's interesting, because then that would, let's just keep following this a little bit. That means he would go and just live his life.
Yep.
He could meet a new lady friend, have kids, and there's more Targaryens in the world.
Could be.
One of them goes to Valyria to find that dragon.
One thing we did take a look at, we went back and looked, and he's still wearing his Night's Watch garb.
He's wearing the black cloak.
And we know that for all that he broke his vows with Ygritte, though I don't think he was wearing those anymore. I think he was wearing wildling stuff.
Yep.
We do know he takes his vows very seriously. So I am kind of with Joshua's reading, but there's no necessarily, again, going back to the earlier question of why does the Night's Watch even exist where it does? Who's to say he can't be a member of the Night's Watch, but still be north of the wall, kind of helping the wildlings settle?
I think he will always be a shield that guards the realms of men. I just don't think it will necessarily be at Castle Black, obeying all those strange old rules that
who
someone.
Is the Lord Commander? Will we ever find out?
Is there anyone else there left at Castle Black to do it? It might
Tormund,
just be Jon.
Maybe.
No, Tormund.
I guess, No, that's true. Well, hopefully in some future AMA with the showrunners, should they ever decide to give us any answers, we'll get some of these. But those are our WTF questions. We, of course, want to hear yours and also your theories on the questions we posed. So please do let us know in the comments below. For now, our watch has finally come to an end for Game of Thrones. But don't worry, as I said at the beginning, the show must go on. We will have one final episode of Dragons on the Wall hitting your feeds next week. And we'll be joined by some very special guests. Like Game of Thrones tried its best to give fans what they want, we'll do the same, but better, of course. If you've been watching Dragons on the Wall since the beginning, which I know many of you have, we wanted to say thank you for the many years of talking together about this show. So we are reuniting the OG small council of Dragons on the Wall and inviting back former cast members Eric Goldman and Roth Cornett, who are now both at Fandom and taking some important time out of their day to come join us. So they will join the four of us in this very special final episode. Until then, don't worry, we have plenty to tide you over, so please do check out Laura's review of the series finale, I can't get over that, of Game of Thrones, and check out our video of the cast of Game of Thrones, thanking everyone for watching. And for all things Game of Thrones, prequels, new books, fingers crossed, and beyond, be sure to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch. Bye.
I'm glad Eric's coming because he owes me $5.